Dawn had not yet broken, but the horizon already glowed red with artillery flashes, flickering like a heartbeat across the torn landscape. Ukraine's defensive lines were ghosts of trenches, carved into frozen earth, surrounded by twisted steel and burnt-out armor.
For weeks, Russian armored columns had tried to push through this sector. Each time they were met not by tanks, but by the invisible eyes of drones. Tiny, buzzing hunters controlled by operators sitting miles away. They watched from screens, their fingers poised like executioners.
At the edge of the city, deep inside an abandoned warehouse, Sergeant Mikhailo adjusted his FPV controls. His team called him Ghost. In front of him, 10 drone screens flickered. Each one showed a different slice of the battlefield. Broken streets, craters, bodies, and the black hulks of Russian T-90s crawling through the mud.
"Targets confirmed," said Danilo, the youngest in the squad. His voice trembled slightly. 4 tanks, moving south of the chemical plant. Looks like they've brought the armadas.
Mikhailo's jaw tightened. The T-14 Armada, Russia's pride, its invincible next-generation tank, had finally entered the fight. For years, it was paraded as the future of armored warfare. Now, it was about to meet something far smaller, far cheaper, and far deadlier.
"Load the warheads," Mikhailo ordered quietly. The room fell silent except for the whir of propellers and the hum of battery packs.
Outside, the first FPV drone rose into the night like a wasp from its nest. The camera feed sharpened. There it was, a massive shape rolling through the fog. Its reactive armor panels shimmered in the dawn's faint light. Around it, infantry advanced cautiously, scanning for ambushes.
"Armada in sight," whispered Mikhailo. The drone dipped low, weaving between shattered walls and debris. Its operator adjusted the throttle with surgical precision. Each movement synced to his heartbeat. The crosshair blinked red, locked on. "Go!"
A second later, the drone slammed into the Armada's engine compartment. The explosion tore through the night, a column of fire erupting skyward. Metal screamed as the tank's armor plates burst apart. The Armada, once Russia's technological triumph, was reduced to a burning wreck.
"Direct hit," said Danilo. "She's gone." But Mikhailo didn't celebrate. He leaned closer to the monitor, eyes narrowing. "No, there's another one. 200 meters east. The next drone launched immediately. Then another. Ukraine's FPV swarm took flight like a flock of dark angels, each carrying a 3D printed shell packed with explosives.
As they soared across the blackened battlefield, Russian electronic warfare units scrambled to jam the signals. Static filled the screens, interference, flickering chaos. Mikhailo clenched his jaw. They're jamming hard. Switch to frequency Delta 3.
The view snapped back into clarity. The second Armada was retreating, reversing into cover. The drone followed relentlessly, dodging tracer fire. Soldiers below fired frantically, their bullets stitching the air like lightning. One round clipped a rotor. The drone wobbled but steadied.
Mikhailo's voice was steady. "Hold altitude, lock now." The feed erupted in white light. Another hit. The second Armada was gone. Inside the warehouse, a moment of silence passed. Then a faint cheer rippled through the team, not of triumph, but of grim satisfaction. "2 Armadas destroyed," Danilo whispered, "in less than 10 minutes.
Mikhailo leaned back, exhaustion showing through his calm exterior. "They'll send more. They always do." Outside, the thunder of artillery began anew. The Russians were retaliating, volleys of rockets smashing into the city. The warehouse shook, dust raining from the ceiling, but the drone operators didn't move. They adjusted their gear, swapped batteries, and launched again.
Hours later, a smoke covered the skyline. Reports came in. 6 Russian tanks destroyed, 3 confirmed as Armadas.
The Kremlin had declared these machines untouchable. Now they were burning ruins. But the cost was heavy. 2 of Mikhailo's team had been killed by counterstrikes on nearby positions. Their monitors still glowed faintly, static humming like ghosts.
He stared at the screens, the images flickering between life and death. "They think they can drown us with armor," he muttered, "but they'll drown in their own fire." The camera feed switched again. A convoy approaching. More tanks, more infantry. The battle was far from over. Mikhailo adjusted his headset. "Let's begin round 2.
The sun finally broke through the haze, a dim orange disk struggling to pierce the smoke over Avdiivka. What had once been a city was now a skeletal wasteland. Towers stood hollow, their windows shattered like open wounds. Roads had disappeared beneath craters and twisted metal. And through it all, the sound of engines rumbled, deep, mechanical, unrelenting. Russia was sending in its next wave.
6 armadas, flanked by T-90Ms and BMP infantry carriers, rolled forward in formation, their turrets scanning the ruins like predators sniffing for prey. Drones buzzed faintly overhead, the only warning of the invisible duel about to unfold. Inside the warehouse, Mikhailo's team worked wordlessly. Sweat ran down their faces despite the cold. Each man was tethered to a console, eyes fixed on their screens. The air smelled of burnt electronics and gun oil.
"Multiple targets inbound," said Danilo, voice low but steady. "Electronic interference increasing. They've got new jammers." "Doesn't matter," Mikhailo replied. "We adapt." He reached for a small transmitter and adjusted a knob. The drone feeds blinked, fuzzed, then cleared, switching to encrypted frequency channels designed overnight by Ukraine's tech volunteers. Across the country, engineers and soldiers were working together, turning civilian drones into battlefield weapons faster than the enemy could react.
The first drone launched, slicing upward through a hole on the roof. The sky outside was alive. Artillery tracers, smoke trails, and distant flashes. The drone darted low, hugging the terrain. On the screen, a line of Russian armor moved along a dirt road, black shapes crawling through the mist. "Target locked," whispered Mikhailo. He could see the lead armada clearly, its turret swiveling, sensors glowing faintly through the smoke. The drone tilted forward, engines screening. Then, static. The feed flickered. For a moment, the screen went black, jamming. Mikhailo gritted his teeth, recalibrated, and punched through the interference. The image returned just as the drone plunged straight into the tank's frontal armor. The explosion was deafening. A shockwave rolled through the street as the armada erupted in fire. Its crew never had a chance to escape. The flames reflected off the nearby snow, a haunting glow that turned the battlefield blood red. "Impact confirmed," said Danilo. "The second one's still moving." "Then we send another," Mikhailo replied. The second drone launched instantly, followed by 2 more. Ukraine's operators had turned precision into rhythm, a deadly choreography of motion and silence. Each pilot tracked his target, maneuvering through destroyed buildings and clouds of dust. Their FPVs raced like guided fury, weaving past power lines and wreckage. Russian anti-drone gunners fired wildly, tracers lighting up the fog. One drone took a hit, spinning out of control, but another dived straight into a convoy truck. The blast shredded nearby infantry and flipped a BMP on its side.
"Multiple kills," said Danilo, watching the feed shake from the blast wave. The Armata crews were panicking now. They reversed, trying to regroup behind cover. But the drones kept coming, relentless, fearless, expendable. Each one cost a fraction of what a tank did, but carried the weight of a nation's defiance.
Within an hour, the Russian advance had stalled completely. The road was littered with burning metal. Armadas that had once symbolized invincibility were now twisted husks, their turrets lying yards away from their hulls. Yet the silence that followed was not victory. A distant roar shook the ground.
Russian aircraft. Sukhoi jets streaked overhead, dropping glide bombs across the city. The earth split open as concrete and flame erupted skyward. The warehouse walls trembled.
"Everyone down!" shouted Mikhailo. The explosion tore through the outer wall, hurling debris across the room. Monitors shattered. For a moment, everything was chaos. Dust, blood, and silence. When Mikhailo opened his eyes, half the room was gone. Danilo lay motionless, his headset tangled in wires. Mikhailo crawled toward him, coughing. "Danilo, talk to me." No answer.
He pressed 2 fingers to the young soldier's neck. Nothing. Mikhailo's vision blurred. For a long moment, he just stared. Around him, the survivors were regrouping, pulling drones and equipment from the rubble. They were exhausted, broken, but alive. He wiped his face with his sleeve and stood up. "Get the backup system online," he said quietly. "We're not done yet."
"Sir," one of the men stammered, "we've lost half our units. We can't—"
"We can," Mikhailo interrupted, "because if we stop now, they'll roll through this city by nightfall." The team worked like machines, their grief buried under the weight of necessity. Within minutes, a new control center was established amid the ruins, cables running over broken bricks, battery packs humming faintly. One by one, the remaining drones took flight again. On the screens, new Russian reinforcements appeared, columns of armor moving through the outskirts, confident that offenders had been silenced. They were wrong. The first drone struck before they even realized they were being watched. A truck carrying ammunition ignited, setting off a chain of explosions that turned the entire column into a rolling inferno. For hours, the battle raged. Drones dove, exploded, and dove again. The operators barely spoke now. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, but their focus unbroken. Each FPV launched carried not just explosives, but revenge. As night fell again, the landscape burned. Black smoke rose into the frozen sky, mixing with the snow. Somewhere beyond the ruins, Russian commanders ordered another retreat, and in the silence that followed, Mikhailo stood among the wreckage, headset still on, his hands trembling. He looked at the shattered monitor where Danilo's feed had once glowed. "This is for you," he whispered. He launched one final drone. The camera feed followed the little machine as it rose into the cold night air, its propellers whispering against the wind. Below, the battlefield was a graveyard of steel. Ahead, faint headlights. Another tank trying to escape. The drone accelerated, locked on, and vanished into flame. Mikhailo closed his eyes. The war was far from over, but for that moment, the ghosts had their justice.